I returned home after 5 years. My sister mocked my low rank. My parents called me an embarrassment. Then the police arrived to arrest me. I remained silent until a four-star general stepped inside and saluted me. That gut-wrenching feeling when you walk back into your old life, and it's nothing like you remember? Worse, what if the people you loved, the ones who were supposed to protect you, have been systematically dismantling your very existence, selling off your past, forging your future, and then planning to have you locked away, all for their own gain? That's exactly what I came home to. And let me tell you, when you're treated like nobody, sometimes that's when you become the most dangerous person in the room. I pulled my car into the driveway, cutting the engine before anyone inside could even hear it. The hood clicked as it cooled, a tiny metallic sigh. I just sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, feeling the grit under my fingernails and that familiar, tight pull on my shoulders that never quite went away. The house looked exactly the same. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, perfectly manicured, trying so hard to project this image of success. Music thumped faintly through the walls. Laughter spilled out every time the front door opened, loud and carefree. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back, just a plain jacket and plain boots. No medals, no ribbons, nothing to signal who I was, just a name tape sewn inside the collar where no one would ever see it. I stepped out, shutting the car door quietly. The old hinges complained, a squeak that always felt like an announcement. Inside, the smell of catered food hit me first. Champagne, grilled meat, something sweet and obscenely expensive. The living room was packed. Faces I recognized, faces I didn't. Phones were already out, recording every movement, every smile. And right in the middle of it all was my sister, Tiffany Carter, absolutely glowing under a ring light, like she was born with a filter attached to her face. "Tiff, the lighting here is perfect," someone gushed. "I know, right?" She laughed, tilting her head just enough for the camera. "Make sure you get Brad when he walks in." Brad, the guest of honor, the almost husband, the reason for all this performance. He was off to the side, wearing a tailored jacket and that confident smirk of a man who'd practiced it in front of a mirror 1,000 times. Someone introduced him as a military man, and he nodded, soaking it up like he'd just been promoted on the spot. I slipped in along the wall, invisible on purpose. It was a skill I perfected over the years. But Tiffany, she always found me. Her smile froze for just half a second before reshaping itself into something sharp, almost predatory. "Oh my God," she shrieked, loudly enough for heads to turn and phones to swivel my way. "You actually showed up." She wrapped an arm around my shoulder, like we were the closest of sisters. "This is my sister, Sarah. She's been away 5 years," my mother added, appearing at Tiffany's side. No calls, no posts, no updates. We hardly knew where she was. Her tone was laced with an accusation that stung, but I just nodded once. "Good to see you, too," I said, my voice flat. Tiffany's eyes flicked down my clothes, a dismissive glance. "So what rank are you now?" she drawled, dragging out the word. I just shrugged. "Still working." Brad leaned in, genuinely curious for a moment. "You Army?" "Something like that." He laughed. "Man, you don't look it. No offense. I mean, where's the uniform?" "See," Tiffany jumped in, tapping his arm. "Brad's in the reserves. They're grooming him for big things. Leadership, visibility, you know." Brad straightened, puffing out his chest a little. "And Sarah," Tiffany continued, dismissively waving her hand at me. "Well, she does logistics or cleaning, something on base, I think." Someone snorted. Another person laughed a little too loud. I felt that familiar pressure building behind my eyes, the one that meant I was about to either scream or cry. I let it pass. Tiffany reached in her clutch, pulled out a folded bill, and pressed a crisp $20 note against my chest. "Here," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Why don't you go buy something nice? We might need an extra pair of hands serving drinks at the wedding." The bill slid down my jacket and fluttered to the floor. The room went silent in that way people get when they're not sure if they're supposed to be uncomfortable yet. I bent down, picked up the money, and handed it back to her. "Keep it," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Looks like you'll need it." A few eyebrows lifted. Tiffany laughed, a high, brittle sound, waving it off. Oh my God, you're still so sensitive. I slipped my hand into my pocket and felt the edge of the black card there. Solid. Cold. Real. I didn't take it out. My father cleared his throat, trying to diffuse the tension. Sarah, your sister's just joking. You know how she is. I know, I said. I do. Brad raised his glass, forcing a smile. No hard feelings, right? Military's military. We all serve in our own way. Sure, I said, meeting his gaze. Some louder than others. Tiffany didn't seem to catch that. Or maybe she did, and just chose not to. She was already turning back to the camera, explaining how Brad had basically put his life on hold for the country. Comments rolled in on her screen. Hearts, flags, fire emojis, the works. I moved toward the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter, just watching. My mother followed, lowering her voice. You could have dressed up a bit, she whispered, her eyes darting around. People are watching. You know this is important for Tiffany, for the family. I know, I said, taking a sip of water. She sighed. Your father and I just don't understand why you chose such a quiet path. It worked for me, I said. She looked unconvinced. From across the room, Tiffany raised her phone again. Everyone say hi to my sister, she called out, grinning. She's back from playing soldier. A few half-hearted waves followed. I looked around the room, at the furniture my grandmother used to polish by hand, at the walls that used to hold her photos, at these people who had no idea whose house they were standing in, or would have been traded. A way to keep it looking like this. Something settled in my chest then. Not anger, not sadness. More like a decision clicking into place. Have you ever walked into a room knowing you could outthink everyone there, but still got treated like the help because you didn't look the part they expected? I finished my water, setting the bottle down with a soft click. Tiffany was still talking, still shining. Brad was still smiling. My parents were still nodding along. I stayed right where I was, quiet, watching, letting them enjoy the moment they thought they owned. I followed the sound of my father's voice down the hall, my boots quiet against the polished floor. The music faded behind me. His office door was half open, a thin line of light spilling out. I paused, listening to the scrape of a chair, the shuffle of papers, the dry coffee made when he was nervous. Just sign it here, a man said. I didn't recognize the voice. Calm, professional, the kind that charged by the hour. I don't see another option, my father replied. We need this closed before the end of the quarter. I stepped inside without knocking. 3 heads snapped up. My father, seated at his desk. My mother, standing behind him, arms crossed. And a man in a gray suit with a leather folder open in front of him. The desk itself looked different, too clean. The framed photo of my grandmother was gone. Sarah, my father said, surprised but not annoyed. We're in the middle of something. I can see that, I said, my eyes going straight to the paperwork. Numbers, dates, signatures. The word transfer jumped out at me. The man in the suit stood, already packing up. I'll give you a moment, he said, nodding politely at me as he left. The silence that followed felt heavier than all the party noise outside. What's being transferred? I asked. My mother answered before my father could. Assets. Which one? She hesitated. Property investments. I looked around the room again. The missing photo, the bare wall. Did you sell Grandma's house? My father leaned back, exhaling like he'd been waiting for this. It was just sitting there, he said. Empty. Costing money. That house wasn't empty. I corrected him, a cold edge entering my voice. It was hers. And now it's helping your sister, my mother snapped, her voice rising. Which is what family does. I laughed once. Short. Sharp. You sold her house to buy the penthouse, I stated, not asked. Yes, my father said, almost defiantly. There it was. Clean and simple. No apology, no hesitation. For Tiffany, I added, the implication clear. For her future, my mother corrected. New York isn't cheap. I picture the old place. The creaky stairs. The backyard where my grandmother used to drink tea every morning. The attic, full of boxes no one had touched since the funeral. All of it reduced to a line item. And the will. I asked. My father's jaw tightened. You're not listed. I nodded slowly, taking that in. He spread his hands in a placating gesture. Your career, Sarah. It doesn't add value to the family name. Tiffany's platform does. Her marriage does. So I don't count. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. My mother stepped closer. You chose to disappear, she said, her voice softer, but no less accusatory. 5 years. No presence. No proof of success. We had to make practical decisions. I glanced at the desk again. Another document caught my eye. A familiar emblem on the corner of a folder. My grandfather's unit patch. Old, faded. What's that? I asked, pointing. My father followed my gaze. Just memorabilia. You sold his things too, I said. It wasn't a question. We kept what mattered, my mother insisted. I opened the folder without asking. Inside were certificates, commendations, a folded flag receipt, all marked as collateral. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. You used his service record to get better loan terms. My father didn't deny it. That ring Tiffany's wearing, I said. The one she keeps flashing at the camera. It's symbolic, my mother said quickly. It was his, I countered. He earned it. My father stood, slamming his hand on the desk. Enough. We're done discussing this. Are we? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the room. Because I see debt schedules here that don't look symbolic at all. He stiffened. You don't understand how finances work. I understand numbers, I said. And these are bad ones. My mother crossed her arms again, defensively. We're handling it. With what? I asked. Likes and comments? Her face flushed. Watch your tone. I'm watching the math, I said, leaning over the desk. You're over-leveraged. You sold off everything solid to keep up appearances. My father reached for the papers, stacking them quickly. This is not your concern. You made it my concern when you used my name as a tax shield, I said. Both of them froze. What? My mother breathed. I pointed to a document near the bottom of the stack. That one. You listed me as an overseas dependent. Claimed exemptions based on my deployment status. My father swallowed hard, his face pale. It's legal. It's risky, I said. And sloppy. He sat back down, suddenly looking a decade older. We did what we had to do for Tiffany, he repeated, the mantra of their self-deception. From the hallway, laughter burst out as someone popped another bottle. The sound felt wrong in this room. My mother softened her voice, trying a new tactic. You'll be fine, she said. You're resourceful. You always were. I closed the folder, sliding it back across the desk. You sold the past to rent the future, I said. And you put it all in her name. My father didn't argue. That told me everything. I turned to leave. At the door, I stopped and looked back at the empty wall where my grandmother's photo used to hang. She deserved better, I said. No one answered. I stepped back into the noise of the party. The music hit me all at once. Tiffany was mid-live stream, laughing, showing off the ring again. The diamond caught the light. It looked expensive. It looked hollow. I stood there, unnoticed, watching my family celebrate something built on things they didn't earn and debts they didn't understand. My hand went back to my pocket. The black card pressed against my palm, steady as ever. I stayed in the house long after the party noise thinned out, moving only when everyone else was too distracted to notice. The kitchen lights were still on. A bowl of half-eaten fruit sat on the counter, flies already circling. Tiffany's phone charger dangled from the wall, forgotten. I reached behind the microwave and adjusted the small camera I'd placed there earlier, angling it just enough to catch the table and the doorway. I wasn't guessing anymore. I found a quiet office, a woman behind glass who typed fast and didn't ask personal questions. I slid my ID across the counter and asked for a copy of my credit history. The full one. She frowned at the screen. You've been busy, she said. I haven't, I replied, but she printed the pages and handed them to me with a look that said she wasn't buying my calm. Lines of debt stared back at me. Short-term loans, high interest, multiple signatures. All dated while I'd been overseas. That's not mine, I said. She tapped one line. The signature matches. It's forged, I stated. She shrugged. Then you want a lawyer? I already had one. I stepped outside and made a call from the car. One ring. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. I was wondering when you'd check, he said. I have the paperwork, I told him. She signed my name. Of course she did, he said. She needed speed, not permission. I closed my eyes for a second. How bad? Bad enough to ruin you if you stay quiet, he confirmed. Not bad enough to scare me, I said, and hung up. I drove back to the house. By the time I parked, Tiffany's car was already there. So was my mother's. I didn't go inside right away. I watched from across the street, engine off, windows down. Through the camera feed on my phone, I saw them sitting at the kitchen table. My mother poured coffee. Tiffany paced. She knows something, Tiffany said, her voice tight. She doesn't know enough, my mother replied, a dismissive wave of her hand. And even if she did, no one would believe her. Tiffany stopped pacing, turning to her. What if she talks? She won't, my mother said, confidently. She doesn't want trouble. I smiled without meaning to. Tiffany leaned on the counter, her voice dropping. The loans are due soon. We'll handle it, my mother said. There's still her insurance. Tiffany's voice dropped even lower. You mean if she has another episode? Don't say it like that, my mother snapped. She's unstable. Everyone knows that. 5 years gone, no records, no social media. It's believable. My jaw tightened. And the doctor? Tiffany asked, a glint in her eye. He owes us, my mother said. He'll sign the evaluation, so we get her committed. Tiffany said slowly, temporary hold. We take control, and the policy pays out. My mother finished the sentence for her. There it was. Clean. Planned. Said out loud like they were discussing groceries. I clipped the recording and saved it. Twice. When I walked into the kitchen, they both jumped. How long have you been standing there? Tiffany demanded. Long enough, I said. My mother forced a smile. You startled us. I heard everything, I said. About the loans, the signatures, the plan. Tiffany laughed too fast, too loud. You're imagining things. I placed the printed credit report on the table. That's my name, I said, tapping it. I was on another continent. My mother scanned the pages, then looked up, her face draining of color. We did what we had to do. For yourself? I countered. Tiffany crossed her arms, trying to regain control. You wouldn't understand. You don't live in the real world. I leaned forward, my voice a low rumble. You borrowed against my future. She scoffed. You don't have one. My mother reached for my arm. Sarah, please. Let's not make this ugly. I pulled away, my gaze locked on Tiffany. You already did. That afternoon, I found a notice taped inside my old bedroom door. An appointment slip. Psychiatric evaluation. Mandatory. I took it down and folded it carefully. By evening, 2 men in plain clothes knocked. Polite. Smiling. Papers in hand. Sarah Carter? One asked. That's me. We're here to escort you for a brief evaluation. I glanced past them at my mother, who stood in the hallway, wringing her hands. Tiffany hovered behind her, phone ready. I'll go, I said. They looked surprised. Inside the car, the younger one tried small talk. I stared out the window, ignoring him. At the facility, they led me to a quiet room. Soft chairs, no sharp edges. A woman with a clipboard smiled, like she practiced it. We just want to ask a few questions, she said. I answer them. Calm. Direct. No emotion for her to grab onto. After 20 minutes, she excused herself. I waited. My phone buzzed once. A message. One word. Handled. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. The woman's smile was gone. There seems to be a mistake, she said. You're free to go. Outside, the 2 men avoided my eyes. When I got back to the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. My mother sat at the table, pale. Tiffany stood by the sink, shaking. They can't do that, Tiffany said when she saw me. They can't just let you go. They can't, I said. And they did. My mother looked up, her voice a barely audible whisper. What did you do? I listened, I said, and I made a call. Tiffany lunged toward me, stopping short. You think you're so smart. I met her stare, a slow, dangerous smile touching my lips. I think you're sloppy. I walked past them, into the living room where the last of the party decorations still lay half-packed. Confetti crunched under my boots. Behind me, no one followed. I brushed confetti off my sleeve and checked the message again. Location. Time. Charity shoot. Public. The kind of event that pretended to be about veterans while quietly auditioning egos. I replied with a single word and put the phone away. The range sat on the edge of town, clean and overbuilt, banners flapping in the wind. A line of trucks that cost more than my car. Volunteers in matching polos handed out ear protection like party favors. A local news van idled near the gate. This was going to be loud, in more ways than one. Brad found me before I found Elaine. "Sarah," he said, grinning like we were old friends. "Didn't think you'd show." "I was invited," I said. "I show up when invited." He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. "This'll be fun. Good exposure. The department's here. Couple of senior guys, too." I followed his gaze. A cluster of uniforms stood near the benches, talking shop. Badges caught the sun. Someone important was always watching at events like this. That was the point. Tiffany appeared, her phone already live. "Guys, look who decided to come out and play," she said to her audience. My sister's finally stepping into the real military world. I put on ear protection and didn't answer. Brad leaned closer. "We're doing a friendly challenge," he said, "just to loosen things up." "What kind?" I asked. "Time drills. Accuracy. Little movement. Ranger stuff." I nodded. "Okay." He blinked. "Really? Really?" Tiffany's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, you're serious?" I picked up a rental rifle from the rack and checked it the way I always did. Chamber, safety, weight balance. Familiar enough. Brad watched, amused. "You sure you don't want something lighter? Start easy." "I'm good." He laughed and turned to the small crowd forming behind the line. "All right, folks. Friendly competition for charity." Applause followed. Phones came up. Tiffany angled herself to keep my hands in frame. Brad went first. He talked while he loaded, about training weekends, about instructors, about how discipline carried over into life. His shots were loud and fast. Decent grouping, not special. He finished with a flourish and raised his arms. "Cheers." Tiffany zoomed in on his smile. "Beat that," she said, swinging the camera toward me. I stepped to the line and adjusted the sling without thinking. The range officer nodded. "Shooter ready." I nodded back. I didn't rush. I didn't pose. I settled in and let the noise drop away. The targets were standard distances, marked. Wind light. Easy variables. The first shot cracked clean. The second followed before the echo faded. I moved through the sequence the way my body remembered, not the way a crowd expected. Controlled. Efficient. No wasted motion. Someone stopped talking behind me. I finished and cleared the weapon. The range officer stared at the target monitor, then at me. "That can't be right," Brad said, stepping closer. The officer checked again. "New record for this setup," he said flatly. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Phones tilted. Tiffany's smile faltered. "Do it again," Brad said, laughing too hard. "Must have been a fluke." I reloaded and went again. Slower this time. Tighter grouping. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncomfortable. One of the senior officers approached, eyes sharp. "What did you train?" he asked. "Where I was sent," I said. Brad cleared his throat. "She doesn't usually shoot," he said. "I mean, not like this." Tiffany swung the camera back to me. "Say something," she whispered. "This is great content." I looked straight into the lens. Don't confuse silence with weakness. The chat exploded. Tiffany glanced down, reading fast, trying to keep up. Brad forced a grin. "Guess you've been holding out." "Guess you've been talking," I said. The officer nodded once. "You available for a demo?" he asked. "Not today." He studied me for a beat longer, then stepped back. Brad laughed again, louder. All right, let's wrap this up." But it didn't wrap. People asked questions. Quiet ones. Real ones. Tiffany drifted away to answer comments, her voice tight. Brad stayed planted, watching me like I'd changed shape. A volunteer handed me a bottle of water. "Nice shooting," he said. "Thanks." Brad leaned in. "You tried to embarrass me." "I didn't say your name," I said. "You knew this was my event. You invited me." His jaw clenched. "You could have missed." "I don't miss." He stepped back, hands up. "No offense." "Some taken," I said. Tiffany reappeared, phone lowered now. "We should go," she said to Brad. "People are being weird." He nodded, eyes still on me. "We'll talk later." "Sure," I said. They left in a hurry, her heels clicking too fast, his smile gone. The crowd thinned. The banners kept flapping. The news van pulled away without stopping. I returned the rifle and signed the log. The range officer slid it back to me. You're welcome anytime, he said. I know. Outside, the sun dipped lower. I walked to my car and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. My phone buzzed once. A new message. No name. Just coordinates and a time window. I started the engine and pulled out, the sound of gunfire fading behind me as the road opened up ahead. I parked across the street and watched the lights flicker on one by one in the penthouse windows. The building looked expensive in the way money tries to look permanent. Glass, steel height. A statement. I checked the time, then stepped out of the car and crossed the street with a folded envelope under my arm. The doorman barely glanced at me. I didn't belong to his mental list of problems. That helped. Inside, the elevator hummed softly as it climbed. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored wall. Same plain jacket, same calm face. When the doors opened, laughter spilled into the hallway. Champagne again. Music again. Same celebration, just relocated. I didn't go in right away. I walked to the far end of the hall and taped the notice to the door across from theirs first. Clean. Flat. Impossible to miss. Then I walked back and did the same to their door. The paper stuck without complaint. I turned and left. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone started vibrating. I ignored it until I was back in the car. The first call was my father. What did you do? He demanded without greeting. I delivered paperwork, I said. What paperwork? Official, I said. You should read it. Silence. Then muffled voices. A door opening. Paper tearing. Oh my God. My mother's voice cut in. Richard, what is this? My father came back on the line, his breath shallow. Foreclosure? That's not possible. It is, I said, and it's happening. This is some kind of mistake, he snapped. We're current. You were, I said, before your debt was purchased. Purchased by whom? My mother asked in the background. A company, I said. Chimera Holdings. My father cursed under his breath. I've never heard of them. They've heard of you, I said. I'm calling the bank, he snapped. Do that, I said. I hung up before he could say more. The second call came from Tiffany. She didn't bother pretending. You did this, she hissed. You're trying to scare us. I don't scare, I said. I notify. My card just got declined, she shrieked. I was paying a deposit. That happens, I said, when accounts are frozen. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's accurate. There was a crash on her end, voices shouting, someone crying. You don't have this kind of power, she screamed. You're nobody. I looked out at the building, all glass and reflection. You'd be surprised what nobody can do. She hung up. I drove home slowly, letting the city breathe around me. When I pulled into the old driveway, the house was dark. My parents' car wasn't there. They were still fighting fires somewhere else. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where plans had been made, where signatures had been forged, where they decided I was expendable. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father this time. The bank says the loan was sold at Red. They won't talk to us. I typed back. They don't have to. Another pause. Then, what do you want? I didn't answer right away. An hour later, headlights swept across the wall. Doors slammed. The front door flew open. My parents rushed in, faces pale, coats half on. Tiffany followed, mascara streaked, phone clutched like a weapon. This is your fault, she shouted as soon as she saw me. You set us up. I stood. Sit down. No, she said. You don't get to sit. I said again, my voice firm. She stopped, and my mother pulled her into a chair. My father leaned against the counter. Talk, he said. Now. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Your debt, I said. All of it. Mortgages, lines of credit, the short-term loans you forgot to mention. He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. You're $5 million in the hole, I said. And counting. That's impossible, my mother whispered, her eyes wide. It's documented, I said. And it's due. Tiffany shot to her feet. You can't do this. I have a wedding. I looked at her. You have a balance. She scoffed. I'll call the police for what? I asked. Bad math. My father looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Chimera Holdings, he said slowly. That's you. I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. You have 24 hours, I said. Pay in full, or the property transfers. My mother stood, her voice pleading. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? I shrugged. You're creative. Tiffany laughed, a high, unhinged sound. You're bluffing. I met her eyes. Call your card company again. She did. The color drained from her face as she listened. You ruined everything, she said, her voice small. No, I said. You did. I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. My father sank into a chair, looking utterly defeated. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why go this far? I thought about the house, the ring, the paperwork, this kitchen table. Because you taught me what family means, I said. And I paid attention. They stared at me like I'd changed languages. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Sarah, my mother called. Please. I paused, but didn't turn around. You still have time, I said. Use it wisely. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face. Behind me, the house buzzed with panic, phones ringing, plans unraveling. I got in the car and drove off, the city lights blurring together as I checked the time and headed toward my next stop. I was halfway through a cup of bad coffee when Tiffany slammed a garment bag onto the table in front of me. The zipper rattled like it was angry. You're wearing this, she declared. I looked down at the bag, cheap fabric, black and white, made of honor without the honor. Good morning to you too, I said. My mother hovered behind her, eyes darting between us. Just do it, she said quietly. Tiffany crossed her arms. If you want Dad's accounts unfrozen, you're going to help today. I stood there for a second, letting the words land. Then I nodded. Fine. They both blinked. Really? Tiffany asked, suspicion mixing with relief. No attitude? Not today, I said. She smiled, a triumphant smirk. Good. Hair at 9 o'clock. Makeup at 10 o'clock. Don't mess this up. She tossed the bag at me. I caught it and headed for the guest room without another word. Inside, I hung the dress on the back of the door and locked it. Then I took out my phone. The first call, cancel the florist. Calm voice. Correct account number. Authorized signature. The second call, pause the catering delivery. Temporary hold. Compliance confirmed. The third call voided the live band's contract. Breach clause. Payment reversed. I worked methodically, the way I always did. No rush, no drama. Just confirmations and timestamps. By 9 o'clock, the house was buzzing. Stylists arrived. Boxes piled up. Tiffany sat in front of a mirror, already complaining. Why does my foundation look yellow? She snapped. It doesn't, the makeup artist said. It does on camera. I stood behind her, adjusting a clip. Hold still, I said. She eyed me through the mirror. Don't get ideas, she warned. I know what you're capable of. So do I said. She snorted. You're a helper today. Don't forget it. I smiled and kept working. By noon, the phone call started coming in. The flowers are late, my mother said, pacing. They'll be here, Tiffany insisted. Relax. The caterer called again. Tiffany answered this time. Her smile slipped as she listened. What do you mean canceled? She hissed. That's impossible. I tied a ribbon, saying nothing. The band manager called next. Then the rental company. Then the planner. Tiffany's voice climbed with each call. Fix it, she snapped at everyone. Do you know who I am? I stepped back as she stood, phone shaking in her hand. You, she said, pointing at me. What did you do? I met her eyes. You wanted help. My mother gasped. Sarah, stop this. Stop what? I asked. The contracts were under my name. That's not true. Tiffany protested. I pulled up the documents on my phone and showed her. You were busy, I said. I signed. Her face went pale. You can't just, I can, I said. And I did. Brad arrived an hour later, already irritated. What's going on? He demanded. The venue's empty. Tiffany rounded on him. She sabotaged everything. Brad looked at me. Is that true? Yes, I said. He laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's efficient. He stepped closer. You're done, he warned. I'll call the police. For what? I asked. Canceling my own contracts. He stopped. Outside, the venue grounds looked wrong. No flowers, no chairs. Just bare grass and mud from last night's rain. Guests started arriving, heels sinking, confusion spreading. Tiffany stood at the entrance, screaming into her phone. Fix this. I don't care how. My mother grabbed my arm. You've made your point, she whispered. Undo it. I pulled free. You taught me leverage, I said. I'm using it. Brad stormed off to take another call. Tiffany sank into a chair, shaking. You're ruining my life, she wailed. I leaned down, so only she could hear me. You rented it, I said. You didn't own it. She slapped the armrest. I invited you into my wedding. You dragged me into it, I corrected her. Guests clustered, murmuring. Phones came out. The story was already escaping. A coordinator approached me, flustered. Are we proceeding? I looked around at the empty space. As planned, I said. Tiffany overheard and lunged. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my sight. I stepped back calmly. I'll change. I went upstairs, locked the door, and took the dress off. It landed in a heap on the floor. I washed my hands, slow and deliberate, and changed into something else. Silk. Black. When I came back down, the house felt smaller, tighter, every sound sharp. Tiffany saw me and froze. What are you wearing? Something appropriate, I said. She laughed, hysterically. You think you're the main character now. I glanced outside at the crowd, the mud, the empty space. I think this is your day, I said. I'm just respecting it. Brad returned, face flushed. The police are on their way, he said. This ends now. Good, I said. My mother sank into a chair. This has gone too far. I checked the time. Still on schedule. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Guests whispered. Phones recorded. The ground stayed bare. I stood near the entrance, hands folded, watching Tiffany pace herself into pieces as the world she'd built on borrowed names and borrowed money finally started asking questions. I stepped through the entrance as the shouting peaked. The silk of my dress quiet against the noise. Conversation stalled when people noticed I wasn't wearing what Tiffany had thrown at me earlier. Heads turned. Phones followed. The room adjusted its attention without asking permission. Tiffany saw me and froze. You can't be here like that, she said, her voice cracking. This is my wedding. I walked past her and set the manila envelope on the signing table, right where the officiant would have stood if there had been an officiant. The envelope made a soft sound when it hit the wood. It was heavy enough to matter. Brad scoffed. What's this supposed to be? Paperwork. The kind that doesn't care about your timeline, I said. He laughed and looked around for backup. A few people laughed with him. Most didn't. I opened the envelope and slid the first packet across the table. Those are copies, I said. The originals are already filed. Tiffany rushed forward. Don't touch that, she snapped, grabbing at the papers. I moved them just out of reach. Relax. It's your handwriting. Her eyes flicked down, despite herself. The color drained from her face. What is this? Brad asked, leaning in. Loan applications, I said. Short term, high interest. Signed in my name while I was deployed. Brad frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does if you're Tiffany, I said. She needed cash. Fast. Tiffany laughed weakly. You're lying. I slid the next page forward. Signature comparison. Forensic match? I said. Independent lab. Brad's jaw tightened. You forged your signature? Tiffany spun on him. I had to. It was temporary. Temporary, he repeated. I pulled out another packet. And this, I said, is the insurance paperwork you tried to activate by declaring me unfit. Murmurs rippled through the guests. A few stepped closer. A few stepped back. My mother pushed through the crowd. Stop this, she pleaded. You're humiliating us. You did that, I said. I'm just organizing it. Brad looked around, searching for an exit that wasn't there. This is a setup, he said. She's trying to ruin us. I nodded once. That part's true. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out a phone. Tiffany's old phone, the one she left charging the night she thought no one was listening. This is where it gets personal, I said. Tiffany lunged. Give me that. I tapped the screen. A photo filled the display. Brad, shirtless, leaning against a hotel headboard. Another followed. Messages. Dates. The room went very quiet. Tiffany stared at the screen like it might attack her. That's fake, she whispered. It's not, I said. Ask your friend. A woman near the back turned pale and tried to slip away. Someone grabbed her arm. Brad's face hardened. This is private. Not when you leave a trail, I said. A man stepped forward from the crowd, older, broad-shouldered, military posture that never fades. His hair was gray, his expression carved from disappointment. "Bradley," he said. Brad stiffened. "Dad." Colonel Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He took the phone from my hand and scrolled through the evidence himself. Slow, careful, thorough. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. "You embarrassed yourself," he said. "And you embarrassed me." Brad opened his mouth. "I can explain." The colonel didn't let him finish. His hand moved once. Clean. Sharp. The sound echoed in the room. Gasps followed. Phones dipped, then rose again. "The wedding is canceled," the colonel said. "Effective now." Tiffany made a sound like air leaving a balloon. She grabbed the table to stay upright. "You can't do this," she whimpered. "We have guests." The colonel didn't look at her. "We had standards," he said. "You failed them." He turned to me. "You're the sister." "I am." "You didn't exaggerate," he said. "No, I said." "I didn't." Brad stared at the floor, one hand on his cheek. "You set me up. You walked into it," I said. The colonel handed the phone back to me. "I'm sorry," he said. It wasn't an apology. It was a statement of fact. I nodded and put the phone away. Tiffany slid down into a chair, sobbing now, mascara streaking unchecked. "You ruined everything," she said again, but it landed flat this time. I leaned in close enough for her to hear me over the noise. "You built everything on my name," I said. "You don't get to keep it." Around us, the guests started talking all at once. Whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into judgments. The Huntington family stood near the exit, faces tight, already recalculating alliances. My mother stood frozen, hands clasped, eyes darting from face to face. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Brad straightened his jacket like it might help. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for today," I said. A uniformed officer stepped inside, scanning the room. Then another. The sirens I'd heard earlier were closer now. Tiffany looked up wild-eyed. "Arrest her," she shouted. She did this. The officers didn't move. I picked up the manila envelope and tucked it under my arm. The paper was warm from the room. Solid. Finished. I turned slightly, enough to see everyone at once, and waited while the noise reorganized itself around New Center. The first officer stepped forward, hand resting near his belt. "We received a call about a disturbance," he said, eyes moving across the room. "Who made it?" Tiffany shot to her feet, so fast her chair tipped over. "I did," she yelled, pointing straight at me. "She sabotaged my wedding, stole private property, and threatened my family. She's unstable. She needs to be detained." The word hung in the air. Unstable? She liked that one. The officer looked at me. "Ma'am." I held the manila envelope under my arm and met his gaze. "There was no threat," I said. "Only documentation." Tiffany laughed, sharp and desperate. "She's lying. She's nobody. She doesn't even have a real rank." The officer glanced at the other officers, then back at me. "Can I see some ID?" I reached into my clutch and handed him a plain card. No title, no flourish, just a name and a code. He frowned slightly and stepped aside to make a call. My mother rushed over. "This is a misunderstanding," she said quickly to the officers. "Our daughter has episodes. We've been trying to help her." I looked at her. She couldn't meet my eyes. Before the officer could respond, the ground outside started to vibrate. At first, it sounded like distant traffic. Then it grew louder, heavier. Windows rattled. A low, steady thrum rolled through the venue. People turned toward the back lawn. A helicopter descended behind the building, wind tearing at the trees, sending napkins and loose programs into the air. Black SUVs followed, rolling in formation, tires crunching gravel with purpose. The room went silent. The officer stiffened. Radios crackled to life. Tiffany's voice shrank. "What is that?" The first SUV door opened. Then another. Men and women stepped out, moving with practiced precision. No rush, no confusion, just control. The helicopter touched down and powered down slowly. When the door opened, a man in full dress uniform stepped out. For stars on his shoulders caught the light. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is that?" The general walked forward, boots steady on the grass, eyes fixed on one point. Me. My parents rushed toward him, panic flipping into opportunism. "General," my father called out, forcing a smile. "We're so honored." There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The general didn't slow down, didn't look at them. He stopped directly in front of me, heels clicking together. He stood at attention. Then he bowed. "Welcome back, Commander Carter," he said clearly. "The operation is complete." You could hear breathing in the room, nothing else. Tiffany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The general straightened and turned to the officers. "Stand down," he said. "This matter falls under federal jurisdiction." The officers snapped to attention without question. My mother grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "What did he just call you?" I gently removed her hand. "My name," I said. Tiffany stumbled forward. "This is fake," she shrieked, laughing weakly. "You paid him. This is a stunt." The general finally looked at her. "Just once, ma'am," he said, his voice cold. "You are speaking about a commanding officer who has overseen classified operations for the past 5 years. Tiffany shook her head hard. "No, she was nobody. She drove a junk car. She didn't even have medals." I spoke before the general could. "Medals make noise," I said. "My work didn't." The general nodded once. "She was ordered to remain unmarked. No public record. No visible rank." Brad's father stepped forward, face pale. "Commander," he asked me quietly. "Yes," I said. He swallowed. "Then everything she said was accurate?" I said. Brad backed away like the floor had shifted under him. "You let me make a fool of myself." "I didn't let you," I said. "You volunteered." Tiffany dropped to her knees. Not dramatically, just suddenly, like her legs had given up. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear I would have never." I looked down at her. "You knew enough." The general turned to a woman from his team. "Begin the audit," he said. She nodded and spoke in her headset. 2 military police officers stepped forward, calm and efficient. "Richard Carter? Sander Carter? You are being detained for questioning regarding financial fraud and falsification of federal documents." My parents froze. "This is insane," my father said. "We didn't know who she was." "That's not a defense," the officer replied. Tiffany crawled toward me. "Please," she said, grabbing at my dress. "I'm your sister." I stepped back. The silk moved easily out of her reach. "You treated me like a tool," I said. "Tools get put away." Brad tried to speak, but his father held him back. "Enough," the colonel said quietly. "You've done enough." The general turned to me again. "Your clearance remains active," he said. "Transportation is ready when you are." I glanced around the room at the empty chairs, the mud outside. The people who'd come for a spectacle and got a reckoning instead. "Give me a minute," I said. He nodded and stepped back. Tiffany was still crying. My mother stared at the floor. My father argued quietly with an officer who wasn't listening. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the ring Brad had given Tiffany. "Glass. Cheap. Fake." I dropped it in her lap. "I don't keep trash in my house," I said. The room stayed silent as the meaning settled in. Outside, the helicopter blades began to turn again, slow and patient, waiting for my decision. I didn't watch them get taken away. I'd seen enough processing rooms to know how that part went. Forms. Questions. Silence broken by the sound of doors closing with no emotion behind them. The military police moved my parents gently, but firmly, the way you handle people who still think they can talk their way out of gravity. Tiffany kept looking back over her shoulder, searching for my face like it might still save her if she found it. It didn't. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had all day. The helicopter lifted off, wind flattening the grass that never got its decorations. I walked past the SUVs and didn't get in any of them. I took my time. No one rushed me. That was the difference. 2 weeks later, the house was sealed. Federal tape across the doors. Inventory notices taped where family photos used to hang. I stood across the street and watched an agent photograph the front porch, the same porch where my grandmother used to sit every afternoon and judge the neighbors with a mug of tea. They asked if I want to go inside one last time. I said no. The penthouse didn't fare better. Frozen accounts have a way of shrinking rooms. The foreclosure moved fast once the audit started. Turns out banks get very cooperative when the words Federal Review show up in writing. The glass and steel that looked so permanent folded like cardboard. Brad disappeared from a news cycle within a week. His father made a short statement. "Professional. Clean. No excuses. That kind of damage doesn't need commentary." It just needs distance. As for Tiffany, the influencer accounts went quiet. Sponsorships don't survive fraud investigations. Neither do friendships built on proximity to money. The last message she sent me came through an attorney. For sentences. No apology. Just a request for leniency. I didn't respond. Instead, I signed paperwork of my own. The foundation took shape quickly. Truth and honor. Simple name. Clear mission. Legal aid for veterans who didn't have the luxury of public records. Financial counseling for families who like to borrow against uniforms they didn't understand. Mental health advocacy that didn't start with locking someone in a room and calling it care. I didn't put my face on the website. I put the work there. The first check cleared the same day the house was officially seized. I smiled at that. Not because of revenge. Because of balance. A month later, I drove past the old neighborhood again. Different car this time. Nothing flashy, just reliable. I slowed when I reached the house, now empty, quiet, stripped down to its bones. The agent sign was gone. The tape, too, waiting for its next story. I parked and got out. The yard needed work. Weeds everywhere. Fence leaning. I rolled up my sleeves and started pulling them out by hand. Dirt under my nails again. The good kind. A neighbor wandered over, curious. "You buying the place?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. He nodded. "Needs fixing. So do most things," I replied. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low enough to take the edge off the heat. I sat on the steps where my grandmother used to sit and let myself breathe. No phones buzzing. No meetings. Just quiet, earned the hard way. I thought about the party, the laughter, the $20 bill sliding down my jacket. How small they made me feel, because it was convenient, because it fit their story. They weren't evil. That was the part people always get wrong. They were just comfortable lying to themselves. And they hated anyone who made that harder. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my hands. The foundation board meeting was in 2 days. A veteran from Arizona needed help with a lien that didn't belong to him. A widow in Ohio had been denied benefits because someone misfiled a form 20 years ago. Real problems. Real stakes. I got back in the car and drove away, leaving the house behind for good this time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't owe me anymore. For most of my life, I thought power was loud. I thought it announced itself, took up space, demanded recognition. That's what movies show you, what social media rewards. People standing on stages, holding microphones, collecting praise like proof of worth. But then I spent years around real power, and I learned something uncomfortable. The people who truly control outcomes rarely need attention. Real power doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It waits until the moment when action is unavoidable, and then it moves. Once. What most people chase is the appearance of power, titles, status, influence. Those things feel solid, but they're fragile. They depend on other people continuing to agree with the story you're telling about yourself. The moment that story is questioned, the power evaporates. That's why so much of modern success is defensive. People work harder to look powerful than to be secure. Real power is quieter because it's rooted in options. When you have options, you don't need to threaten. You don't need to explain. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You can walk away. You can wait. You can choose the outcome that costs you the least. That's what makes it intimidating. There's a clear difference between borrowed power and built power. Borrowed power comes from money you don't control, relationships that depend on constant approval, or authority that exists only as long as someone else allows it. Built power comes from skills, knowledge, preparation, and independence. Borrowed power collapses under pressure. Built power holds. You see this in financial life all the time. People living on credit look wealthy until the bill comes due. People living within their means look ordinary until an emergency hits, and they don't panic. Power isn't about how impressive your life looks on the surface. It's about how resilient it is when something goes wrong. The same is true in careers. Titles change, companies reorganize, markets shift. If your value is tied to a single role or employer, you're exposed. If your value is tied to skills that transfer, you're insulated. The quiet professionals who keep learning while others chase recognition are the ones who stay standing when the system resets. Control of information is another form of power people underestimate. Knowing what to share, when to share it, and when to say nothing at all is a skill. Oversharing makes you predictable. Predictability makes you manageable. You don't owe everyone access to your plans, your struggles, or your next move. Privacy isn't secrecy. It's strategy. One of the most important forms of power is having an exit strategy. That applies to jobs, relationships, and situations where you're being tolerated rather than respected. If you can't leave, you're negotiating from weakness. If you can leave, the entire dynamic shifts, even if you never do. This doesn't mean becoming detached or cynical. It means building a life where your survival doesn't depend on anyone's approval. That kind of stability changes how you show up everywhere. You're calmer, more selective, less reactive. People mistake that calm for indifference. It's not. It's confidence without performance. There's also a moral dimension to real power that doesn't get discussed enough. Power reveals character. When someone gains leverage, they show you who they are. Some people become generous. Others become cruel. The difference isn't in the power itself, but in the values underneath it. Building real power gives you the responsibility to use it cleanly. Not to humiliate, not to dominate, but to set things right and then move on. True strength doesn't linger in revenge. It corrects the imbalance and returns to purpose. That's why applause isn't necessary. Applause is external validation. Power is internal alignment. If you're chasing attention, you'll always be dependent on it. If you're building capability, attention becomes optional. So, let me ask you this. If the people closest to you only value you when you're useful to their image, or worse, when they can exploit your quiet strength, do you owe them another chance? Or do you owe yourself the freedom to walk away and build something honest with what's left? What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with family and deal with the fallout? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know what you think. And if stories about accountability, quiet strength, and real consequences resonate with you, make sure you stick around for the next one.